I never thought a random Craigslist ad would change my life. My old apartment lease was up, rent had doubled, and I had zero energy to look for a new place properly. So there I was, scrolling late at night, half expecting the whole thing to be a scam. That's when I saw the listing. Quiet guy looking for a roommate. Downtown loft. Cheap rent. Flexible schedule. Must love dogs. The photos looked decent enough. The place was bright, had exposed brick walls, and a ridiculously tiny balcony that I could already imagine myself smoking on at sunrise. I sent a message, expecting radio silence. A reply came within 20 minutes. "Hey, I'm Alex. When can you come by to see the place?" I agreed to meet him the next evening. When I arrived, Alex opened the door before I even had a chance to knock. He was tall, probably 6'2", with dark, tousled hair that somehow looked messy, but perfectly intentional. His green eyes scanned me quickly, like he was assessing whether I belonged here, and maybe deciding if I was worth noticing at all. "Hey," he said, his voice low, calm, and annoyingly attractive. "Come in. Coffee?" I nodded, fumbling with my bag. The loft smelled faintly of coffee and the faint tang of dog shampoo. A golden retriever sprawled on the floor like he owned the place, which, honestly, he probably did. Alex handed me a mug and gave me a tour. The kitchen was small but functional. The living room was open, airy, with sunlight streaming through huge windows. I tried to focus on the space and not the way his t-shirt hugged his shoulders, or how easily he moved around the apartment, confident and effortless. "So, you work downtown?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, freelance architecture stuff, mostly models and renderings." "You? Graphic design," I said, and immediately regretted how ordinary it sounded compared to whatever cool, important things he did. We chatted for a while, and I found myself laughing more than I had in weeks. There was something easy about Alex. The way he leaned against the counter, the slight smirk when he teased my terrible coffee-making skills, the way he laughed like it was a secret between the two of us. By the end of the evening, I was sold. I'd move in. I had no idea that agreeing to live with him would turn the next few months into the most confusing, frustrating, and exciting time of my life. The first week was almost painfully ordinary. We kept our schedules, passed each other in the kitchen with polite nods, and avoided awkward silences. I told myself it was fine. That's just how roommates were. But then, little things started to happen. A brush of his hand as he passed me a dish. A long look when I walked into the living room. A laugh that lingered a beat too long when I tripped over the rug. Nothing overt. Nothing that made sense. But I noticed, and it made me aware of every moment he was near. And then came the night that changed everything. I was asleep on the couch after working late, the glow of my laptop still illuminating the room. I was just starting to drift off when I felt it, the faintest pressure on my side, warm and deliberate. My eyes snapped open. Alex was sitting there, closer than necessary. "Hey," he whispered, barely audible. "You awake?" I froze. My heart was hammering, but I couldn't move. His green eyes met mine in the dark, searching, unsure. His hand brushed mine lightly, not a touch that screamed mischief, but one that lingered too long for it to be innocent. What are you doing?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Not sure," he admitted, his lips curling into that frustrating smirk. "Couldn't sleep." I wanted to tell him to move, to leave, to act like nothing was happening. But there was something in the way he looked at me, hesitant, vulnerable, and something else. Desire, maybe? Confusion? It didn't matter. My mind had stopped functioning rationally. By the time he shifted closer, I realized that the safe, ordinary boundaries I'd built between us had vanished, and I had no idea how to fix it. The moment stretched, heavy and electric, like the quiet before a storm breaks. Alex didn't move away, and I couldn't either. It was as if some invisible force had tethered us together, and every instinct in my body screamed both caution and curiosity at the same time. I wanted to look away, to laugh it off, to act like this wasn't happening. But his gaze held me, steady and unwavering, and for the first time in a long time, I felt exposed in a way I hadn't anticipated. "You're really awake," he whispered, barely audible, the words floating between us in the dark. His hand hadn't moved, still resting near mine, fingers brushing against my wrist. The warmth was intoxicating, almost dizzying, and I could feel my pulse in my ears. I wanted to pull my hand back, but I didn't. Instead, I let it hover there, caught in the tension of the moment. "Yeah," I managed to say, my voice hoarse, betraying the calm I was trying to maintain. "I'm awake." He let out a soft breath, almost a sigh, and shifted slightly closer. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. And then it happened. His hand moved, just a little, sliding along my arm, tentative, testing boundaries. I felt a shiver run through me, a mix of anticipation, fear, and something far more primal. "I didn't mean to," he began, then stopped. The words faltered, leaving a silence thick enough to taste. I realized he wasn't just testing me, he was testing himself. And somehow, that made it even more intense. I didn't know whether to say something, to break the spell, or to just let it happen. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the city outside the window, distant sirens, and our own breathing. Then he leaned just slightly, a whisper of movement, so subtle I wasn't sure it was real. His shoulder brushed mine, and I froze, trapped in the sudden, impossible closeness. My mind screamed, warning me of the danger of this, but my body betrayed me. I wanted this. I needed it. I couldn't tell why, but I couldn't deny it. "Are you sure about this?" I finally asked, my voice trembling. I didn't know if I meant the proximity, the attention, or everything about the electricity that had suddenly surged between us. He paused again, his green eyes glinting in the low light, shadows dancing across the sharp planes of his face. "I don't know," he admitted. His honesty made the tension even more unbearable. I couldn't sleep." And his words trailed off. He didn't finish the thought, didn't need to. The way he was looking at me, the way he was hovering, said more than words ever could. My chest tightened. I wanted to close the distance, to touch him, to confirm that this was real, not a dream. But I didn't know if that would be welcomed or if I'd be stepping over some invisible line. Then, almost without thinking, I shifted slightly closer, just a fraction of an inch, enough to let my shoulder brush his. He didn't move away. Instead, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at his lips. That tiny reaction was enough to send a jolt of heat straight through me. I couldn't help it. I let my gaze drop, following the line of his jaw, the curve of his neck, the way the light caught the muscles in his arm. I realized then how much I had noticed him before, how much I had admired him from afar, and how dangerous that admiration had become. Alex shifted again, bringing his hand to rest lightly over mine. Just a touch, just a whisper of contact. But it was enough. Enough to make my stomach twist, and my thoughts scatter. I could feel every beat of my heart, every tiny movement of my body, every sensation amplified to a degree that made it impossible to ignore. "You're not scared?" he asked softly, almost teasing, but with a tremor in his voice that betrayed something deeper. "Scared of what?" I countered, though I knew the answer. I was scared of what was happening. Scared of crossing a line. Scared of what I might feel if I let myself. But more than anything, I was scared of wanting him this badly. He leaned just a little closer, and I could feel his breath brush against my cheek. That tiny, intimate movement shattered whatever resolve I had left. My body reacted before my mind could catch up, a shiver of need traveling through me, pulling me toward him despite every rational thought screaming against it. "Then, stay with me," he murmured, so close I could feel his warmth against my skin. "Just for a little while, no pressure, just stay." I didn't need any more encouragement. Slowly, hesitantly, I shifted closer, letting my shoulder press against his. His hand squeezed mine, just slightly, enough to let me know he was real, that this was real, that none of this was a dream. And in that moment, lying there on the couch in the quiet darkness, everything else fell away. All the walls I'd built, all the doubts, all the rationalizations, they didn't matter. All that mattered was the way he looked at me, the way his hand felt in mine, and the strange electric current running between us. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt truly awake. I didn't know what would happen next or where this would lead, but I knew one thing: nothing would ever be the same between us again. The rest of the night passed in a strange, suspended quiet. We didn't speak much, but every small movement felt magnified. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic outside, even the occasional creak of the old building. It all seemed louder somehow, more intimate. Alex shifted slightly, resting his head against the back of the couch, still close enough that I could feel his warmth radiating against my side. I wanted to reach out, to touch him, to bridge the gap fully, but I was paralyzed by the weight of what fully even meant. Eventually, his hand inched slightly along the couch cushion until it brushed against mine again. This time, I didn't flinch. Instead, I let our fingers intertwine, tentative, testing the waters. The contact was light, but it sent a jolt through me, a combination of fear, longing, and relief that made my chest feel tight. For the first time, I realized that he might feel the same pull I did, that maybe he had been thinking about this too. The tension between us, the moments we'd both been pretending didn't exist. He started, voice low, almost caught in his throat. His hesitation made it impossible for me to pull away. I've never done this before with someone like you. I swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. Someone like me? What did he mean by that? But the truth was, I didn't care. My own nerves, my own desire, drowned out the need to analyze his words. Like me? I echoed softly, my own voice trembling slightly. He nodded, glancing at me through the dim light, his green eyes serious but vulnerable. Yeah, you're different, in a good way. It's not just... He trailed off again, the uncertainty in his tone making my pulse race even faster. I've never wanted this before. Not like this. My stomach twisted. The admission was so raw, so honest, that I felt my own defenses crumble. I wanted to tell him I felt the same, that I'd been thinking about him, noticing him, wanting him for months. But the words got caught in my throat, tangled with nerves and anticipation. Instead, I leaned just slightly closer, testing the space between us, my shoulder brushing his. He didn't pull away. A soft laugh escaped him then, nervous and quiet. God, this is really weird. I smiled, almost involuntarily, though my chest tightened at the sight of his expression. Yeah, weird, but good weird? I asked. My voice was softer than I intended, but the vulnerability in it made him look up at me. He bit his lip, hesitating, and then nodded slowly. Yeah, good weird. The words settled between us, heavy and charged. I could feel the heat radiating from him, smell the faint scent of his cologne mixed with the warmth of his skin. It was intoxicating, pulling me closer, making it impossible to ignore the desire building in the pit of my stomach. I don't want to rush anything, he whispered, his hand tightening around mine just slightly. But I also don't want to stop. My heart leapt at his words, the honesty of them breaking down the last of my hesitation. Neither do I admitted, voice low. My fingers brushed over his hand again, tracing the lines of his palm as if memorizing the contact. Not even a little. That seemed to give him permission. Slowly, almost cautiously, he shifted closer, until his chest pressed lightly against mine. The closeness was dizzying, overwhelming, but it felt right. I could feel the warmth of his body, the subtle rise and fall of his breathing, and every nerve ending in my body seemed to light up at the contact. For a long moment, we just stayed like that, suspended in the quiet intimacy of the room. Neither of us spoke, but every touch, every glance, every breath was a conversation in itself. It was tentative, slow, a careful exploration of boundaries, but it was electric. I realized then that I didn't need words. Every heartbeat, every movement was enough to convey what we were both feeling. Finally, Alex whispered again, so low I almost didn't hear it. "Can I kiss you?" My breath caught. Could I? Should I? The tension, the longing, the months of unnoticed glances and subtle touches had all built to this exact moment. I nodded, barely, my lips parting slightly in anticipation. He leaned in, slow, deliberate, giving me the chance to pull away, and then his lips met mine. The kiss was soft at first, testing, gentle, but the intensity grew with every second. It was slow, intimate, like discovering something I hadn't realized I'd been missing. My hands found their way to his shoulders, feeling the tension in his muscles, the warmth of his skin beneath my fingertips. And just like that, the line between roommate and something far more dangerous had blurred completely. I didn't know where it would lead, or what it meant for the next day, the next week, or our lives in general. But for that night, none of that mattered. All that mattered was him, us, and the undeniable pull that had finally broken through the careful walls we'd built around ourselves. The morning after, the apartment felt different. The sunlight streaming through the blinds couldn't hide the tension that now lingered in every corner, every surface. I woke first, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events from the night before. The kiss, the warmth, the closeness. Everything was a blur of exhilaration and fear. Alex was still asleep on the couch, sprawled across a blanket, his hand resting near mine as if subconsciously keeping me close even in sleep. The sight of him made my chest tighten in a way I hadn't expected. I had thought roommates were supposed to be predictable, manageable, even boring sometimes. But this was nothing like that. My body reacted to him in ways I hadn't prepared for, and my mind was already racing ahead, imagining what might come next. I wanted to pull away, get up, make coffee, pretend that nothing had changed. But the second I moved, Alex stirred, his eyes fluttering open. Green eyes met mine, half asleep, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. It was an awkward silence, loaded with the electricity of the previous night, the unspoken questions hanging between us. "Morning," he said finally, voice husky and low, as if he had been rehearsing the words. "Morning," I replied, my own voice sounding foreign in the tension that had settled over us. I wanted to say something, anything, to break the spell, but the words caught in my throat. He shifted closer, sitting up slowly, careful not to disturb the delicate balance of space and proximity. "So, about last night," he started, hesitating. He ran a hand through his hair, messy from sleep, and my pulse jumped. I know it was weird. I mean, not weird, but you know what I mean. I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. I did know what he meant, and I also knew that calling it weird was a massive understatement. "Yeah, I know." The corner of his mouth twitched, half smile, half grimace. "I don't want things to be awkward between us," he continued. "Because I don't want to stop, not if you don't want to either." My stomach flipped. I hadn't fully realized how much I wanted him until he said it aloud. The confession, tentative as it was, stripped away the last of my hesitation. "I don't want to stop," I admitted quietly, my voice barely more than a whisper. His eyes widened slightly, and then a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. Relief, amusement, and something deeper flickered in his gaze. "Good," he said simply. We spent the next hour in an almost surreal routine, making coffee, exchanging small talk, but every glance, every brush of our hands carried an undercurrent of what had happened the night before. Every movement was amplified, loaded with subtle intent, and neither of us could ignore it. By mid-morning, the tension became unbearable. I found myself leaning a little too close to him as he reached for the sugar, and he didn't move away. Instead, he tilted his head toward mine, a question in his gaze that needed no words. My breath caught. I wanted to answer, but no words were necessary. Our bodies understood each other in a way our voices couldn't convey yet. When I finally set my cup down, Alex shifted so that our knees touched under the small kitchen table. Just a brush, a faint contact, but it sent a ripple of heat through me that I couldn't contain. I looked up to meet his eyes, and for a moment, time seemed to stretch, drawing us into a quiet intimacy. "You really have no idea how long I've wanted this," he murmured, almost shyly, the words startling me because of their honesty. "I think I've had an idea," I said softly, unable to hide the grin tugging at my lips. I felt my own hands clench slightly in my lap, the tension of restraint warring with the desire building inside me. He leaned back slightly, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "We should probably talk about boundaries, because I don't want this to ruin anything between us if—" I cut him off, leaning just enough to close the small distance between us. "We don't need rules yet," I whispered. "We just need to see where this goes." His smile was slow, deliberate, and I could see the mix of relief and anticipation in his eyes. "Yeah," he said quietly. "See where this goes." By that evening, the atmosphere between us had shifted entirely. Simple interactions, passing a plate, brushing past each other to grab a towel, even sitting together to watch a movie, were electric. I caught myself staring at him more than I probably should, noticing every subtle movement, every flicker of emotion on his face. And when he looked back at me, it was impossible to pretend that nothing had changed. Later that night, as we settled onto the couch, our shoulders touched naturally, comfortably, yet charged with tension. He leaned slightly against me, and I didn't move. The heat from his body was intoxicating, the nearness suffocating in the best possible way. I wanted to kiss him, to feel him, to explore every sensation I had been imagining for months, but we were still testing, still pacing ourselves, trying to navigate the delicate line between desire and restraint. And yet in that quiet apartment, under the dim glow of the city lights outside, it was clear that the boundary had already been crossed. Nothing would ever be the same between us again. The days that followed were a blur of stolen glances and quiet tension. Every interaction with Alex carried a weight I had never experienced before. The simplest things, a brush of his hand against mine while reaching for a cup, the way he lingered near the kitchen counter while I cleaned, sent my pulse racing. It was subtle, electric, and entirely intoxicating. I kept thinking about the way he had looked at me that first night, the tentative touches, the whispered words. I had tried to convince myself it was just a moment, a fluke of exhaustion and alcohol. But the reality was undeniable. He wanted this as much as I did, and the thought both thrilled and terrified me. That evening, we ended up in the living room, sprawled on opposite ends of the couch. The city lights spilled through the window, painting the room in streaks of gold and amber. I tried to focus on the TV show playing, but every laugh, every movement of his hand pulled my attention back to him. Without thinking, I shifted slightly closer. He didn't move away. Instead, his eyes flicked to mine, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to shrink until it was just the two of us, sitting in silence, suspended in the heat of something unspoken. "I keep thinking about last night," he murmured, his voice low, almost a whisper. I felt a jolt at the confession. "You mean the couch?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual, though my heart pounded in my chest. He let out a soft laugh, nervous and self-conscious. "Yeah, and everything after. I can't stop thinking about it. About you." The honesty in his voice, the vulnerability, made my stomach flip. I wanted to tell him the same, to confess the nights I had lain awake thinking about him, imagining this exact moment. But instead I reached out, letting my fingers brush against his hand. His eyes widened slightly, and then he squeezed gently. A small but deliberate touch that sent a shiver through me. "God, I've wanted this for so long," he admitted, the words tumbling out, unfiltered. I swallowed hard, unable to deny the truth anymore. "Me too," I whispered. My voice sounded foreign, raw with emotion, but it was real. He smiled then, that same mix of relief and anticipation, and leaned just slightly closer, closing a fraction of the distance between us. Every nerve in my body was alive. I could feel the warmth radiating from him, the faint scent of his cologne mingling with the natural warmth of his skin. My chest tightened, and I realized that the line we had been dancing around for weeks had already blurred completely. He shifted again, closer this time, until our knees pressed together under the blanket we had draped over the couch. I could feel the heat of his body, subtle but undeniable, and the tension between us built to a nearly unbearable level. I wanted to reach for him, to explore this closeness fully, but fear and desire wrestled for dominance. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered, voice trembling slightly, as though admitting uncertainty made it real. "You don't have to," I said softly. "We'll figure it out together." The small gesture, the promise, seemed to give him courage. Slowly, deliberately, he leaned forward, resting his forehead lightly against mine. The contact was electrifying, intimate, a silent acknowledgement of everything that had been simmering beneath the surface. I closed my eyes, savoring the moment, the warmth, the way our breaths mingled. It was terrifying, yes, but it was also exhilarating. Every doubt, every fear, seemed to melt away in the presence of this fragile, tentative connection. Minutes stretched, or maybe it was hours. I couldn't tell. Time seemed to lose all meaning as we stayed like that, faces inches apart, hands brushing, hearts hammering in sync. When he finally spoke, it was almost inaudible, but it hit me harder than any shout could. "I want you," he said, and the simplicity of it, the honesty, left me breathless. I didn't need to respond. My actions, slow and deliberate, spoke louder than words. I leaned in, closing the distance fully, letting our lips meet in a kiss that was both gentle and urgent. The intensity built quickly, hands exploring cautiously, testing boundaries, discovering new sensations with every touch. In that moment, the world outside ceased to exist. There was no apartment, no city lights, no distant traffic, just him, me, and the undeniable connection that had been waiting to be acknowledged for weeks. The next morning, sunlight filtered lazily through the blinds, casting soft stripes across the living room. I woke to the faint scent of coffee and the gentle sound of Alex moving around the kitchen. My body ached in all the right ways from the closeness of the previous night, and my mind refused to catch up with reality. Alex glanced over his shoulder at me, hair still tousled, green eyes bright and teasing despite the early hour. "Morning," he said, voice low but warm. There was an almost imperceptible shift in the way he looked at me, a confidence now mingled with something more intimate, more knowing. "Morning," I replied, voice hoarse. I wanted to say more, but my throat felt dry, my mind buzzing. Instead, I let him serve coffee and toast in silence, the proximity between us making every movement feel electric. After breakfast, we found ourselves back on the couch, closer than usual. Our legs brushed a simple contact, but it sent sparks up my spine. Neither of us moved away. It was as if the couch had become a private island, a place outside the normal rules, where our boundaries could stretch and bend without consequence. "You're quiet this morning," Alex murmured, leaning slightly against me. The warmth of his body pressed just enough to be noticed, enough to make my pulse jump. "Just thinking," I admitted. My hand brushed against his, and instead of pulling away, he held it lightly. That single gesture carried more weight than any words could convey. He turned slightly, enough to meet my gaze. "About last night?" His voice was almost hesitant, betraying the same mix of fear and desire I had felt. I nodded slowly. "Yeah. About us. About this." I gestured vaguely between us. "I've never felt like this before. It's intense." Alex smiled, a small, almost shy curve of his lips. "Me neither. But I like it. I like us." His words hung between us, fragile, yet electrifying. I wanted to respond, to reach for him, to pull him closer and seal the confession with action rather than words. I did just that. Slowly, I leaned into him, letting my shoulder press against his. He responded immediately, pressing back slightly, the pressure gentle but charged. His hand found mine, fingers intertwining naturally, as if our bodies had been rehearsing this contact for months. Minutes stretched into a comfortable, electrifying silence. We were close enough that our breaths mingled, and every subtle movement became a conversation. Alex leaned his head against my shoulder, his warmth radiating against me, and I realized I could stay like this forever. But the tension was building. The subtle touches, the lingering glances, the soft, almost accidental brushing of our bodies. It was a silent countdown to something more. I could feel the heat pooling low in my stomach, a mix of desire and anticipation that made it impossible to focus on anything else. "Do you want to take this further?" Alex asked, voice barely audible. The question was loaded, trembling with honesty and vulnerability. I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I admitted softly. "I've wanted it for a long time." He shifted closer, lips brushing against my ear. "I don't want to rush, but I can't help myself." His words sent a shiver down my spine. My body responded instinctively, leaning into him, pressing closer, needing him as much as he needed me. Our first touches in earnest were tentative, careful. Hands roamed lightly, testing boundaries, exploring contours without words. Every brush of skin against skin sparked something deeper, electric, urgent, but tempered by the care we had built between us. Time lost all meaning. The apartment, the city, the world outside, none of it mattered. There was only us, tangled together on the couch, discovering the uncharted territory of each other's bodies, feeling every subtle movement, every small shift of weight, every heartbeat synchronized with the other. Finally, we paused, catching our breath. The intensity hung in the air, heavy and intimate, a tangible pulse that neither of us wanted to break. Alex rested his forehead against mine, eyes closed, lips curved in a content, exhausted smile. "We should probably slow down," he murmured, though his hand stayed in mine, fingers still entwined. I shook my head gently, smiling despite the racing of my heart. "Not yet," I whispered. "Not tonight. Just this." And in that moment, lying together, tangled in warmth, the world outside ceased to exist. We had crossed a threshold, yes, but it was one built on trust, desire, and a connection deeper than either of us had expected. The days following that night were a careful dance. Nothing in the world outside the apartment mattered as much as the tiny interactions between Alex and me. Every glance, every accidental brush of our hands carried a silent charge, a private signal that only we understood. But there was a new complication. Life outside our apartment didn't pause, and neither could we. Work, errands, and freelance deadlines pulled at us in different directions. Yet the moments we shared were intensified by the knowledge of what had passed. A touch that might have been casual before now made my stomach flip. A glance from across the kitchen made my heart race. Even the briefest conversation carried the weight of all the nights we had spent discovering each other's boundaries. One evening, after a long day of client calls and architectural drafts, I returned home to find Alex sitting cross-legged on the couch, laptop balanced on his knees. He looked up and smiled, that slow, knowing curve of his lips that always made my chest tighten. "Long day?" I asked, dropping my bag and shedding my jacket. "The longest," he admitted, closing the laptop. "But worth it now." His green eyes lingered on me a moment too long, and I realized he meant more than just the workday. We spent the evening together, lying on the couch, fingers intertwined, talking quietly about inconsequential things while the city hummed softly beyond the windows. The closeness was comforting, but it also stirred something deeper, a yearning I couldn't ignore. Eventually, the conversation faltered, replaced by a comfortable silence. I felt his hand brush against mine, lightly at first, then more deliberately, fingers tracing the line of my palm. The touch was electrifying, sending shivers through me, and I leaned into him, letting the warmth of his body ground me. "I have to tell you something," he said suddenly, voice low, almost hesitant. The words immediately set my pulse racing. Something I should have said before, but I wasn't sure. He trailed off, his gaze flicking away briefly before returning to mine. "What is it?" I asked softly, leaning closer. "I've never done anything like this before," he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "With someone I actually care about. I mean, I've been with people, sure, but this, This is different. You're different. My chest tightened at the confession. I had suspected as much, but hearing it aloud made the reality undeniable. I cupped his face gently, my thumb brushing over his cheek. "You're different too," I whispered. "And I care more than I expected." A smile spread across his face, a mixture of relief, vulnerability, and desire. He leaned into my touch, eyes closing briefly. "I was afraid," he admitted, voice soft. "Afraid I'd ruin everything, or that you'd regret this." "You could never ruin this," I said firmly. "Not when it feels like this. Not with you." He opened his eyes and met mine, and in that moment, the tension between us dissolved into something more profound than mere desire. There was trust, understanding, and a raw, undeniable connection that neither of us could deny. Slowly, deliberately, we leaned closer, lips meeting in a kiss that was gentle, exploring, but with a hunger that had been building for weeks. The kiss deepened naturally, hands wandering carefully, testing boundaries, discovering new sensations in the other's warmth. Every touch, every sigh, every heartbeat felt amplified, like the world had shrunk to just the two of us. After a long pause, he pulled back slightly, forehead resting against mine. "We should probably take things slow," he whispered, though his fingers remained entwined with mine. I shook my head gently, a soft laugh escaping me. "Slow can wait," I said, voice low, breath shaky. "Right now, I just want this. I want you." He smiled, a mixture of amusement and desire, and pressed closer again, letting the intensity build naturally. The couch became our sanctuary, our private world, where the outside rules didn't apply, and every touch, glance, and movement was a declaration. Hours passed unnoticed. At some point, the city outside disappeared entirely, replaced by the quiet intimacy of our shared space. And for the first time, I realized that nothing, no schedule, no fear, no doubt, could hold back what was happening between us. We were free to explore it, together, fully and without reservation. As I held him close, feeling his warmth and hearing the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, I knew that whatever came next, this was only the beginning. We had crossed lines, broken boundaries, and discovered desires we hadn't fully understood before. And somehow, I knew that the connection we shared would only grow stronger, deeper, and more consuming with every passing day. That night, the apartment felt alive with anticipation. The subtle, electric tension that had been building for weeks now pulsed between us in every glance, every movement. The world outside might have continued spinning, but inside, everything was suspended, focused entirely on the small space we shared and the undeniable connection between us. We sat close on the couch, shoulders touching lightly, the dim glow of the city filtering through the blinds. Alex reached for my hand, fingers intertwining with mine as naturally as breathing. I could feel the warmth radiating from him, the rhythm of his pulse beneath my palm, and every instinct in my body screamed to draw closer. "I can't stop thinking about you," he murmured, his lips just above my ear. The whisper sent shivers down my spine. "Not for a second." I leaned into him, resting my forehead against his, closing my eyes to savor the intimacy. "I've wanted this for so long," I admitted softly. "All the little moments we've had, I've noticed them. Every glance, every touch." His breath hitched slightly, and he pressed a little closer. "You noticed?" "Every single one," I whispered. The honesty hung between us, heavy and charged. It was as if saying it out loud had made the tension almost unbearable. Slowly, deliberately, he tilted his head, brushing his lips against mine. The kiss was soft at first, a tentative exploration, but the intensity grew quickly. Every barrier we had carefully maintained shattered in that moment. My hands moved instinctively, sliding along his arms, feeling the warmth of his skin, memorizing the curves and angles I had long admired from afar. Time became irrelevant. There was no outside world, only the two of us, tangled together, exploring the new depth of our connection. Each movement, each sigh, each small touch spoke volumes about desire, trust, and vulnerability. The intimacy wasn't rushed. It was deliberate, careful, yet utterly consuming. At one point, Alex pulled back slightly, forehead resting against mine, eyes searching mine for reassurance. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. I smiled, breathless. "More than okay. I've never felt more alive." His lips curved into a slow, satisfied smile, and he pressed back closer, hands moving with a newfound confidence. The playful, tentative energy of previous nights had transformed into something deeper, a recognition that our connection was mutual, irresistible, and real. We stayed like that, exploring the uncharted space between friendship and something far more intimate, letting each moment build naturally. There was laughter, gentle teasing, and the kind of quiet that only exists when two people are utterly comfortable with each other, yet still intoxicated by the thrill of discovery. Eventually, we pulled back slightly, foreheads still touching, breathing in sync. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the city outside. "This us, it feels like it's meant to be," Alex murmured, voice soft but certain. I nodded, unable to speak for a moment, overwhelmed by the depth of emotion coursing through me. "I've never felt like this before," I admitted. "Not with anyone." He smiled, eyes glinting with warmth, desire, and a touch of mischief. "Neither have I, and I don't want to stop. Not ever." I leaned in once more, lips meeting his in a kiss that sealed the promise of what we had discovered. Something deeper than friendship, something intimate, thrilling, and utterly consuming. The boundaries that had once existed were gone, replaced by trust, desire, and an unspoken commitment to explore this connection together, without fear or hesitation. As we held each other close, the city outside blurred into insignificance. For the first time, I realized that life would never be the same, and I didn't want it to be. With Alex by my side, every day promised new discoveries, new moments of intimacy, and the kind of emotional and physical connection I had only ever dreamed of. That night, tangled together on the couch, we didn't need words. Every touch, every glance, every shared breath spoke for itself. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly seen, truly understood, and truly alive.